Welcome to another Talking Positive with Randy and Alan. Hope everyone's been having a good week, and we're going to start you off with another great week. Today, our guest is Kevin Moss. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yep. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
So, Kevin, give us a little bit of background of who you are and what brought you here.
So yeah, I grew up or was born in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, and many years ago, clearly, and I moved around a lot, both as childhood and I've been in field sales my entire life, so moved around a fair amount throughout my career, multiple cities across the United States, and ultimately, I think here today because one of my stops was in New Orleans, Louisiana, for 8 years or so, and we had the pleasure, Lisa and I, of adopting two our special children, Melissa and Wiley, when they were 5.5 and 7. And we ultimately moved here to Michigan in 1998 when they were in the fourth and fifth grade. So, we lived in Novi, and I've actually been somewhere between the Novi and Canton corridor for the last, 25, 26 years.
Busy corridor.
It is a busy corridor. Yes, it is.
What was it that prompted the move to Michigan?
So I had worked for a company called Standard Coffee Service, and had moved all around the Northeast. My dad was in field sales leadership, and I kind of just followed that DNA type thing, came by it naturally, and ultimately lived in cities like Cincinnati, Atlanta, and New Orleans was where the headquarters was. So I was there and ultimately made a career change and joined Staples Business Advantage, and that job was here, based in Michigan.
You mentioned Lisa.
Lisa Moss, dear friend, lives in Atlanta, my ex-wife, and mom of both Wiley and Melissa.
A little birdie told me something about a place near and dear to your heart called Saratoga Springs, New York. You want to talk about
I
that?
do. It is my favorite place on earth. So we moved around a lot. My dad was in field sales, so I was born in Vermont, and we moved North Carolina, California briefly, upstate New York several times. Ultimately, wound up in Saratoga. Graduated from Saratoga High School, and this is kind of home, and that's kind of home. Those are my two homes. I always say Saratoga's where I'm from. Went to and go back every summer to the racetrack. Still, one of my dearest friends named Kevin and Greg. They're Albany and Saratoga respectively. So it's just a special place.
You talked about moving around a lot when you were young with your father. A lot of times, children don't like to move and get bounced around. How was that experience for you, and how were you able to make it through? I guess staying positive about that whole situation.
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Because we moved a lot, maybe 8 to 10 times, and some were big moves across the country, back across the country. Changed schools a lot. I think I went to 3 first grades, a couple of different high schools. So that piece was difficult, and I look back on it now. Probably has helped me with resiliency in life, right? Life is not easy, and so I think that those experiences of just showing up in a new school again, new neighborhood again, you need to. Be kind of mentally tough, outgoing, and it was really the way things were, though. So when you're a kid, it's like, well, my dad is taking another a lateral position or a promotion, and he was just doing the right thing by his family, and even as I became in my teens, I realized, oh, he's hit this progression, this success from a guy that had a kid at 9. Mom and dad, or mom, both are still around, thankfully. Hopefully they'll see this at some point. They were 19. They had me, and to watch them figure it out, it probably also was a pretty good life lesson.
Did you have siblings too?
I do. I have one sister named Stephanie. So
And
she's 7 years younger.
And where's she in this
Actually,
area?
Stephanie, she lived with me for several years. She was from Chicago, lived in Chicago for a long time. That was kind of one of the last places my parents lived. Actually, they moved to Boston. Actually, worked for the same company with my dad. That was a kind of a special thing in my life later on. And she now lives actually with my parents in Florida.
You and Lisa experienced some challenges along the way. Do you care to share
Sure,
some of
sure,
those?
yeah. First of all, Wiley and Melissa are kind of the best thing that ever happened to both of us. I always say we didn't adopt them; they adopted us. So it was great. Both Wiley and Melissa. Melissa's talk about her briefly first.
Were
30.
they, excuse me
They
for
are
one
they are
minute.
natural brother and sister.
Okay.
Yep, they are siblings. They were very close, and Melissa's soon to be 35, two grandchildren, and just is the apple of both Lisa and I's eye. She lives just 2 miles from me, so it's a very special relationship. And again, they just the best thing to happen to us. Wiley also just a wonderful young man, a great athlete, outgoing, just a super good kid. As time went by, into later on in high school, we began to realize that Wiley had an addiction to varying opiates, which is never a good path. And he ultimately gotten into a lot of trouble. We traversed the country with rehab programs, both we from Minnesota to Del Mar, California, to Palm Springs, California, also, and Colorado, actually, the hills of Colorado. So he battled hard. We battled hard. Never gave up. And ultimately it became more and more of an issue, and he just was struggling, and he was in and out of the house, and valiant efforts by all of us. Ultimately he was arrested a lot, he was in jail a lot, got out of jail, and I'll never forget, he called me and said, hey, I'm going to make it this time. And I flew in from New York City late at night, and I'm like, I'm gonna come see you. So I saw him, and the next day he had gone to get high, I guess, and he went back to his bed and passed away.
It's always tough burying a child, and a lot of people experienced it. My mother experienced it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For you and Lisa,
Yep.
what was it that allowed you both to be able to get through that time? Like, how were you able to stay positive through that?
Yeah, I think probably three things for me, and I think they're pretty similar, and I'll answer a little bit for Lisa too. I think the first one was he would have wanted that. Then secondly, there was Melissa. You had this unbelievable sophomore in college that we needed to lift up and make sure that her life would be as normal as it could possibly be. They both had really, really difficult upbringings before us, and this was obviously a huge blow to her. Our family and friends were super important, and I think both Lisa and I relied on that, leaned on that, and let that happen rather than isolate. Lisa did some grief groups. I did less of that. Lisa's incredibly strong in faith, and it's interesting. Her faith was always very strong. She brought faith to me, and this was a crossroads for me. Now what, right? Because we always prayed for his healing and his peace, and we got it. We didn't get it the way we wanted it, and so it was a lot of doubt and questions. But actually, I ended up leaning further into faith, and that has also continued to help and be a support. But I don't know that you don't. Life changes forever.
Sure.
It's just kind of the mental approach that, okay, this is awful. It will always be awful, but how do you deal with it? And at the time, I was, you just think there'll never be joy again. That really isn't the case. There is a lot of joy in life, and it's the whole two things can be true in life,
Yeah.
and it's the worst thing ever. It's life changing. It's awful, and there's joy and really great things that have continue to happen in our lives.
Cool. Thank you for answering that. I know it's always difficult, but like you say, you find joy in life and you keep living. So I applaud you for that. My brother also just lost his son and daughter and granddaughter within like I
What?
think it was a 3 year span.
Oh no!
It was bad, maybe 4 year span, but it's
Wow.
good to know and to hear you talk about that. So I'm sure he watched this interview. That'll be something that'll be able to help him deal with what he's going through. Um,
Wow.
let's
That's
go
terrible.
back a little. I'm sorry.
No, that's terrible.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
really
thank
sorry.
you. Yeah. Let's go back a little bit because you talked about Wiley and Melissa, and when you guys they adopted you guys,
Yeah.
right? What was that like? Like, because obviously I know they brought a bunch of joy to you and your ex-wife's lives at the time, and still do. But what was that like? Going through that process and then making them comfortable enough to allow you guys to be their parents.
So we, Lisa and I we were living in New Orleans, and we had said that we wanted to foster and or adopt. It's kind of an interesting, cute story that during that period of time we realized that maybe we probably wouldn't make the decision to adopt and would continue to foster. We had one or two foster opportunities that fell through. Old school times, no cell phones. I get a call at my office from the a social worker that said, "Hey, we have these two kids that are only for adoption, natural brother and sister, tough lives, but we think this is a perfect fit." And I said, "Hey." Lisa and I made a decision that we only wanted to foster at this point if they're we would be love to foster them. And they said, well, we really want to get them into a permanent home. Right, this was in late July, I believe, in advance of school. And so we hung up, and I called Lisa, of course, Lisa was and is a dentist, so she was at work and called me back, and I told her about it. And Lisa has a very strong Southern accent. And since it's moved back to Atlanta, it's even stronger now. So she'll see this at some point. And she said, "Well, we should meet them." And I was like, well, "If we meet them, they are coming home with us. This is we're going to bring the puppy dogs, the cute kids home." We met them at a Chuck E. Cheese, kind of. So it was like a date type thing.
Yeah.
And Melissa said, "Are you here to adopt us?" And long story short, it took they were in our home. We had to scramble to get them in school, and that had a lot of components. Lisa's parents were there to help us at first. They showed up on a Friday night with a couple of trash bags full of stuff, and we began. And I think it was great and hard. I think, and I'm sure Melissa would probably say the same. I know Lisa would. That it was from the moment they arrived, they were our children. I think to a large degree we were their parents, but they had not had experiences as that most 5 and 7 year olds had.
Sure.
They knew they knew of one flavor of ice cream. They weren't advanced, but to watch how quickly they blossomed and flourished. Both in school and personally, and professional or personally, and then in sports for Wiley, and sports and school friends for Melissa. It was great to see, and then think of that. They from Louisiana, when just 2 years later, moved to Michigan, which might be like
Culture shock.
the three of us going to the moon, right? And they had these deep Southern accents. No one could really understand them. We would go out to eat, and they're like, "What's wrong with the food?" Well, it was no flavor compared to what they were used to.
No spice.
Yeah, no spice at all. Melissa still is a huge fan of Cajun Creole and Southern food. But it was a ton of work. Both Lisa and I had good demanding jobs, but we were a family from the beginning. That is one thing. We were a family from day one.
Which is awesome. Were you able to get their background, what they went through with their parents, somewhat?
We know some of it. I'd want to be a little careful to given Melissa will see this, but they were found in an abandoned building when they were 2.5 and 4.
Wow.
Wiley was protecting her, Melissa. I don't think they had any clothes on, and they were, they weren't clean, and a bad situation. They then went to a foster home in very rural Louisiana, Boothville, Louisiana, where there were teenagers, and that was also a poor environment, very poor environment, where they were not treated well. I don't want to get into too many details, but they were not treated well at all, and disrespected in many ways, and that that's when they were 5.5 and 7. That's when we adopted them. So.
And how did you get Melissa through the situation with Wiley?
Well, first of all, Melissa is like the strongest person I've ever known. She's 2.5 years old, found an abandoned building. She dealt with unspeakable things in the foster home. Then she loses her brother, and Wiley's back part of his life, last 3 years of his life were awful for him and awful for us and awful for Melissa, and a lot of trials with that. I think to a large degree, she leaned on friends and family. She got herself through it a lot. I think it was just same thing. I mean, we're just a family, and we're just gonna, somehow we're going to get through this. I don't know that at the time you'd have no idea really how.
Right.
But as I always say, like I still had to get up and brush my teeth. Like no matter the day after he is done, I still brush my teeth, and I for 6 months, and Melissa has very heartfelt stories. And two things. I'll get back to that in a minute. The two worst moments of my life are obviously arriving at the house and realizing that Wiley was not going to make it, even though that had not been confirmed yet. And then 2.5, 3 hours later, Melissa was driven from Albion, where she went to school, to the hospital, and walking in and walking her to see Wiley was the absolute worst moment of my. Those 2 hours were just the worst. I'm like, so at some point you say, okay, can it get worse than this? And maybe probably not, right? So, but we were just committed to just supporting Melissa, every step of the way. But she lifted herself up too. I think that she's super resilient person, and now is the most normal, functioning, cool mom, wife, friend, family member ever.
Nice. What type of advice would you give a parent that is, and I mean you touched on it a little bit, but
Yep.
if there was one or two things that you would say to a parent that is dealing with grief from losing a child, what would that advice be for them?
I think to embrace the grief, and I know that sounds really weird, but I think if you don't embrace the grief, I think if you just ignore it, it will just linger, and your journey to some level of normalcy, some beginnings of joy would be longer, or maybe not even happen. So embracing that means getting help, talking to professionals, being in grief, which I did do, and Lisa did more of the grief groups. Uh, Encouraging friends and family to talk about it. Um, Embracing the day, the birthday, and just because they're not here physically does not mean they're not an integral part of your life,
In your heart.
in your heart. And so keeping them there, I actually talk to Wiley. I pray in the morning in the shower, and then at least 3 or 4 times a week I talk to Wiley, a little bit. And I would say ghosts are good. Show up anytime, ghosts are good. And so those would be some of the things, but also to not be guilty for having a good day, not be guilty for having a good time. Um, and this is a totally learned skill. One of the really worst things, my worst reactions was if somebody lost a family member, not a child, but
Sure.
like a brother or a parent.
Yeah.
I could have given a shit less. Like I acted like I did. So that was kind of the last thing that has come. Now I really would care. Like if your dad passed away, I would care about that and say, but 5 years ago, I truly could have cared less.
Right.
And so making sure you identify where your flaws are, where you've placed your anger, your frustration, your misery. I placed it on not giving a living crap what happened to other people.
Gotcha.
Even though I'd fake it, you don't, I can't be an ass, but but I felt bad that I didn't care. And so those, really kind of dealing with your demons, because you're going to have them, but then also not being guilty about enjoying life, not being guilty about having joy. And that's hard. At first, you're like, you're laughing and you're like, and then it's like you catch yourself.
Wow.
So you've learned to have more empathy toward people that
Yeah,
have
for sure.
gone through challenges.
Yeah. No, obviously, people that would lose a child, I would always have had empathy with that.
Mhm.
One thing I never did, it's interesting because people always now, like somebody looting, oh, well, I know it's not like your loss. Like loss is loss.
Right.
I think they're all painful to everybody, so that piece I have, there has been times over the years that people have lost kids, and I've always said call me, and I've had a couple people that have. Melissa actually was highly involved for a while. Busy now with a job and family, but she would speak to large groups about drug use, drug addictions at schools with detectives and police officers. It was really cool. At the end of all the events, people would walk up and ask questions. Melissa would have all the people because she really lived it. Not that, and everybody else was caring, incredible as well.
Yeah. So one thing, and I know we're getting towards the end now, but I wanted to ask. Normally, we ask our guests, what's on their bucket list, like what's some of the things they want to do that they haven't done. But now, you with grandchildren, are there things you want to do with your grandchildren that you weren't able to do with Melissa? And
That's a great question. We did a lot. That was one thing that I really, I think Lisa and I both feel good about. We did a lot with them, but yeah, I think James is my 6-year-old, almost 6-year-old grandson, and Benjamin's almost 1. So actually,
Oh,
in a
wow.
couple of weeks, so have to get their names in here. And yeah, I mean, I think more than the comparison would just should be highly engaged and involved in their lives. They're very lucky. Andrew, my son-in-law's parents, live a couple miles the other way from them.
Cool.
So they just have highly involved grandparents that we were buying clothes for them this morning for Christmas at
Oh,
Target.
wow.
So and really just being engaged and involved in their lives. Rarely would James plays soccer. I rarely miss a game. Those types of things. So more the presence and the big support system. Yeah, it feels like it takes a village to raise little ones, right?
Yeah.
And their parents, Andrew and Melissa, are amazing parents, and as much support as as can be provided, all the better, right?
Right.
Cool.
Do you find yourself reaching out to other people that have had the similar situation that you've gone through, or other people contacting you?
When I find out about recently an installer for the company I work for, they do outdoor playgrounds. He had lost his son, and I said to director of operations who reports to me, hey, have him, if you'd like to reach out to me, and he said I'll call you tomorrow, and he never did. So I'm not as proactive as I should be. Lisa has really focused on prison ministry. Because Wiley was in jail a lot. That's kind of some of the repetitive behavior of the drug use and stealing, and then getting caught, and multiple arrests. And so the back part of his last couple years, much of it was spent in and out of jail.
Cool. Lisa's in Georgia, you said?
Lisa's in Atlanta, yeah.
In Atlanta.
She was from Atlanta. We met in Atlanta.
Okay.
We moved to New Orleans, and that's where we adopted Melissa and Wiley.
And does Melissa still have that southern accent?
She does not. She does not. No, she.
Now the Midwestern?
It's kind of every now and then you can hear her say something drawly, but Lisa's has returned to fine Georgia form.
Cool, very cool. Well, thank you so much.
Oh,
joining
thank you.
us. It was a true honor and pleasure to have you on, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
It was my pleasure. My heart goes out to both of you. I know you both have had lots of loss as well.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Cool.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
If you'd like to be a guest on our show, Talking Positive with Randy and Alan, you can call 313-454-1104 or email us at talkingpositivepod@gmail.com. Go out there and make it a positive week.
See you next time.